This is going to take about 12 minutes of your life, so if you don't like fishing or anything to do with a river or a fish, then I'd bail out now. The season on the test starts on the 3rd of April and goes right the way through until the end of October. We don't usually start until the 1st of May, just to keep my sanity intact, because it's a long old summer. First on the trout's menu is the hawthorn. Usually arrive around mid to late April and are known as the St Mark's fly, arriving around St Mark's Day. After that, we're on to the granum. I actually thought these were some sort of moth until I looked on Google, and it turns out they're actually a species of sedge. After the granum hatch is the mayfly. It's the one that everyone waits for, hatching in their masses. Usually begins around mid-May, goes right the way through until the first week of June. Traditionally, as soon as the mayfly gets going, the weather breaks, gets cold, wet and windy. Early May is perfect for iron blue. Huge hatches of flies in cold, wet, windy, horrible weather. These tiny little flies hatch out and sit on the surface of the water. The mayfly begins its life as a nymph at the bottom of the river. Mid-May, swims to the surface and hatches out into a fly. Freshly hatched mayfly is referred to as a dun, then flies off into the trees to shed its skin. Once its skin's been shed, it comes back as a spinner. At the spinner stage of the mayfly's life, it's ready to mate. Once the mayfly's laid its eggs on the surface of the water, it's referred to as a spent. We've all been at that spent stage at some point in our life. As we go into June, it's minnow spawning season. The wild trout love these huge shoals of food. Even the minnows struggle to get their end away in peace without being eaten. We have 3 weed cuts on the river each summer, one in June, one in July and one in August, each lasting about 10 days. The deeper parts of the river are cut with a weed cutting boat. Parts of the marginal fringe are topped off with a hedge cutter, carefully cutting round all the wildflowers. The last 2 days of the weed cut are known as the clear-off days. Cutting must stop, and you are given 2 days to clear down all your hung-up weed. Bridge stalls and weirs must be cleared off. Any floating raft of hung up weed must be cleared down, hung up on brambles or overhanging branches. These are all sent down in unison in specific dates so that it doesn't affect the fishing. As well as weed cutting, there's always masses of mowing to do throughout the summer. As June melts into July, the weather usually warms up, the water temperature heats up, and we get a lot of sedge. On the rare occasion that we do get a hot day, the fishing's confined to the last half hour of light. The hardest part of my job is trying to get the fishermen to stay on. A little twig wedged in the valve of the car tyre usually does it. Now it's time to change your tactics and take off that 3 foot of 8 pound line that you've been using. Stick a long, nice 10 foot 3 pound leader on and a G&H sedge, only because it looks like a trail pellet. Then we're on to the blue-winged olive. These tiny little upwing flies will hatch en masse in the afternoon and evening. They'll fly upstream and lay their eggs above a weir or a slightly broken bit of water. The last half hour of light can provide the most fantastically frustrating fishing you'll ever experience. All the spent flies drift downstream below the weir where all the fish are waiting. The only way to catch these rising fish is to match the hatch. Little upwing flies do the job. Size 16 to 18 Lund's Particular and Sherry Spinner were designed for this exact purpose and are both blue-winged olive imitation. Let's see if you can tie one on at 9:30 at night after 2 bottles of wine. So I just hooked a trout and it's turned into a pike. Salmon used to be a regular sight on the river, now they're few and far between. This season we've seen a return of more than ever before. There were so many this season, I actually managed to catch a couple. But still not enough for Dave to get one. Mid to late July is caterpillar season. These are alder beetle caterpillars. They sit on the alder leaves, munching away. A little breeze and knock them off into the water and the trout sit underneath waiting. This one wouldn't have a clue of a bus belly, let alone a caterpillar. He's only got one eye, and the good one ain't on this side. As we head into August, water levels drop down and the water goes clear as gin. It'll be a really testing month. Seashells are grayling on the shallows, as well as big pikelet in the slack water. Many fishermen have wasted hours fishing for these. They're chub, not trout, and they very rarely take a dry fly. Some people love catching chub. I've had turds that fight harder than these fish. Each their own, I suppose. Eels are a common sight on the river. You usually see them sat on a patch of gravel sunbathing in sunny weather. As August turns into September, everything starts to cool down. The water temperature slowly drops and the fishing improves. This is the time of year that daddy longlegs that you've been fishing with all season comes into its own. I did think this was a load of cormorants coming over, but when I heard them honking, I realised it was a load of geese. I was going to go on a bit of a cormorant ramp, but decided not to bother. Anyway, nothing signals the arrival of autumn more than a load of geese, and a few leaves falling off the trees. The end of September marks the end of the season. The trout on the test stay in season until the end of October, but we finish fishing just so I can get a bit of a rest really. There's still a bit of fly life in October. Large dark olive and a few spurwing are about. You can see the bats mopping up. Mid to late October you can see the salmon pairing up ready to spawn. All the little graylings start shoaling up for protection. And the trout start cutting their reds in the gravel ready to spawn. Winter jobs usually consist of redecking bridges, there's always plenty of tree work to do in the winter. Felling dead ash and cutting back awkward branches. All the marginal fringe is topped off, pulling out any woody nightshade, and keeps all the wildflowers intact for next season. Once we reach the dark days of winter, there's not much else left to do apart from go pike fishing really. With the drop in water temperature and the winter rain colouring the river, they become more active and feed more regularly. January and February are usually the best months for this. They really get the big old girls on the munch. And as it feels like winter's going to go on forever, just like that, it's April again and it's time for the start of the season.